Hello everyone, welcome back to Out of Spec Reviews. I'm Ryan. Today, I've got the BMW i5. It's the eDrive 40, so rear-wheel drive with the big battery, and we're taking it on our 10% challenge, which is essentially our road trip simulation test. So let me tell you a little bit about the BMW i5 as well as our testing procedures. This is the BMW i5 eDrive 40, which, as you can see, is a big ol' sedan. This is essentially a replacement for the 5 Series. Now, you can still get a 5 Series with an internal combustion engine. However, this is also an option, and it's called the i5. This one we have here is rear-wheel drive, and it's got an about 82 kilowatt hour battery. It's riding on 21-inch wheels, so it's rated for 270 miles on the EPA cycle. However, BMW tends to outperform their EPA ratings. Regardless, I just thought I'd tell you a little bit about it. It's a mid-size sedan, and this price point is right around $80,000, which is fairly steep. It's a good bit larger than a Tesla Model 3, probably closer to a Model S size, and very nice inside. However, that's not as important as our charging as well as our efficiency. And those are two really key factors when it comes to road tripping. So let me tell you a little bit about this 10% challenge, which is essentially a road trip simulation. Like with many of our tests, we first set the tires to the factory recommended pressures. Next, we drive the car and run it down to precisely 10% state of charge and precondition the battery for fast charging. We do this to simulate a road trip. Oftentimes when you're pulling into a charger, you'll arrive at a lower state of charge. We chose 10% because that gives you a reasonable buffer. And of course, when you're on a road trip, you'll want to precondition the battery, whether you're doing that manually or adding it as a destination. That will make sure that you get peak charging speeds right when you plug in. So of course we go ahead and do that. And next we go over to the 350 kilowatt chargers right back over there and plug in. Now, when we plug in, there's a little bit of a delay between when it clicks in and when it actually starts charging. That's called the handshake time. I'll record that separately. Then we're going to charge for precisely 15 minutes because we think that this is a pretty reasonable amount of time to charge. While we're charging, we're going to have the climate running because, again, when you're on a road trip, you'll often spend time in the car just hanging out while the car is charging. After 15 minutes are done, we're going to go ahead, unplug, and go ahead and drive on our way onto the highway. I'll again have climate control, and I'll keep it between 68 and 72 degrees, whatever is most comfortable, and I'll head onto the highway. We're going to speed up very gently up to 80 miles an hour, which we chose as a reasonable road tripping speed. People like to go faster when they're going on their road trips. So we'll travel on the highway at 80 miles an hour, and we'll just try to go out, and once we've used about half of our replenished battery, we'll head back. My goal is so that we're reaching just about 10% state of charge right at the position where we got onto the highway. Furthermore, I'm also going to be adding this charger back as a destination because that will make sure that the battery preconditions to charge again. Again, this is simulating a road trip. So this is a realistic scenario. What we're going to do is maintain our 80 miles an hour and keep an eye on our battery state of charge. The moment it takes over from 11% down to 10%, that's going to be our number. That's how far we've gone on our 10% challenge and our ultimate result. So, as I mentioned, I've already brought the car down to 10% state of charge. It's fully preconditioned, so I'm going to go ahead, pull on over to the chargers back there, plug in, and record the handshake. You'll be joining me very shortly. As I said, 10% charge right there, and I'm gonna plug in right now. You'll join very shortly. I plugged it in, and it is actually ramping up fairly slowly. The handshake took 34 seconds, and still ramping up. I think that's probably gonna be close to our peak, 207 kilowatts. I saw a peak of 211, and it's already tapering down below 190. Just some commentary. I'm not all that impressed with the charging behavior. At under 160, it's only been 5 minutes, so leaves a little bit to be desired. 10 minutes, 41%, 135 kilowatts. Pretty mediocre in my opinion. Only 114 kilowatts at 50% state of charge, so fairly middling. And final stats right there, 36.9 kilowatt hours delivered. And reset individual. Cool, now we'll get all the stats. Gentle acceleration up to 81 miles an hour indicated is 80 miles per hour GPS speed. So lock it in there and we can get started. We can see we're already down to 50% state of charge. Yeah, it's 2.5 miles from the charger to here and a gentle acceleration to 80. Apparently that takes 3% state of charge. No, realistically there is some sort of BMS calibration and it's using energy to cool down the battery, which I'm sure is very warm after taking on all that energy. But regardless, we're now moving and we can see how far we're gonna go and what kind of efficiency we're gonna get. We've got very good conditions, pretty mild wind, and it's 64 degrees Fahrenheit. So, yeah, fairly favorable. Taking this exit and turning around to avoid a little bit of traffic, which is no problem. We're gonna regen a little bit, get the energy back in the battery, loop around real quick, and go back other direction. Some gentle acceleration back up to 81 indicated, and heading back in the other direction. Checking back in again at 20% state of charge. Let me give you some quick stats right here. 2.9 miles per kilowatt hour, and we've done 68 miles. I just wanted to mention a little bit about what this car is like on a road trip, hypothetically. Now, I've been in here for several hours. I also did the range test, and I have to say it is very quiet and quite comfortable. I'm impressed, though I do think the price is fairly steep. I think it's definitely quieter and more comfortable than my Model 3. However, for nearly twice the price, I would really hope so. There are some weird exclusions, which include no cooled seats. Just not here for 80 grand. So that's a little bit of a head scratcher. But regardless, even without the cooled seats, which we wouldn't be using on this test since that's not part of our protocol, it's quiet, it's comfortable, it's a nice place to be, good visibility, and I think the best part is this optional Bowers & Wilkins sound system, which is very, very good. And there's 10% state of charge. It happened right before 92 miles, which will be our result because we round up. So 92 miles. Comparing it to all vehicles, it's pretty solid. Comparing it to sedans, it's only iffy. Let's take a closer look at some of the data, some of its closest competitors, and how it stacks up. I've highlighted the BMW i5 here in our 10% challenge results, and as you're seeing, it's a pretty average performance. The biggest problem for it was the charging. It's not that it's particularly bad, it's just not very good either. The charging was better than a Tesla Model 3 rear-wheel drive or a Polestar 2, also better than a Volkswagen ID4. It was comparable to something like an Audi e-tron or Q8 e-tron, however, the charging wasn't as good as something like a Tesla Model X Plaid or any of the 800-volt vehicles like the Ioniq 6, Taycan, or Lucid. The BMW i5 was quite efficient. We saw 2.9 miles per kilowatt hour. This almost matches the Lucid, which had 3.1 miles per kilowatt hour. We did have better weather conditions when we were testing the Lucid. However, the Lucid's also all-wheel drive compared to rear-wheel drive with the i5, so Whole thing is a little bit apples to oranges comparison, but it's interesting to put it into perspective. And overall, this pretty solid efficiency at 80 miles an hour makes sense for a sedan. Sedans tend to have lower frontal areas and a lower coefficient of drag, so they should have less of an impact at higher speeds when you compare it to something like a big brick of an SUV or like a Hummer EV. So, simply speaking, sedans tend to perform better at higher speeds if you compare it to a big ol' Hummer EV. And I think this highlights a good point about EVs and road tripping. A lot of times you can't just rely on only good efficiency or only good charging. Ideally, you really want to have both of them, and that will give you the best ownership and road tripping experience. I'm really interested to hear what everyone has to say and whether you think BMW struck the right balance on this vehicle as far as range, charging, efficiency, and whether you think that this is an acceptable road trip experience for something that's approaching $80,000. Well, I'm looking forward to hearing what everyone has to say, and I'll see you all in the next one.